Hello and welcome to Headlines from Whose Views. Happy New Year. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Are you aware that the BBC has recently been accused of feeding viewers, and I quote here, a diet of woke bias in breach of its own impartiality rules? Well, of course, the BBC has come back denying that. Seriously, I ask. Joining me tonight to talk all about this, I have got, joining me from the Whotastic Pal, I've got Third Doctor Ian and I've got Paul. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Hello. Oh, and to you. Guys, listen, thank you so much for joining me for this particular show. So I don't know if you are aware of this. What's happened over the Christmas and New Year period is that there has been a paper published, and the paper has been published by the Campaign for Common Sense. Partial to some performative drama, the BBC, and bias. And what they've done is, through this paper, they have actually said to the BBC, look, you are too liberal, you are supporting extreme left-wing ideology, and you are too woke. And in fact, they are accusing the broadcaster of breaching its own impartiality rules. And the BBC have denied it. Are you surprised?
No, not at all.
No, not one bit. No.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. No. All right, so, I mean, what, I just don't understand where this is coming from. Really, are we the only people that can actually see how it's got for the BBC? I think
it's tragic, GT. We have to have a campaign for common sense. That's tragic, isn't it? It really is.
It really is in this day and age. We're in the 21st century, and here's this campaign for common sense coming along and sending this paper to the BBC to say, have you looked properly at your programming? I mean, there's so many things here, guys, that we can look at within Doctor Who itself, aren't we? Or isn't there, rather?
It's lost it. The BBC's lost it as a whole, and Doctor Who is sadly its poster child. I think they're riding on the back of its popularity, and they're determined to push their agenda. And of course, they're going to deny it, of course. But they're like the politicians in Westminster, aren't they? They're in a bubble. They're in a left-wing Islington-style bubble. And the people, they will have got this report. They will have spoken to a focus group. And it'll have been a focus group of people that are exactly like them, and they'll all have the same opinion. There will be nothing challenged, and they'll just come back with a rebuttal. And it's bollocks. It's always bollocks. And that report was absolutely bullseye, bang on the money. And they can't accept it because they are divorced from reality, and they should be defunded. And I'm going to bang the table. There.
Yeah, hashtag defund the BBC. Yeah. I'm sure that day is coming at some point, because obviously, as we've often said on Whose Views to our fellow fans outside the UK, the British Broadcasting Corporation is funded by the British license fee payer. Yes, if you buy a television in the United Kingdom, you also have to buy a license fee, of which, of course, in April 2024, the license fee is going up to £173 per annum, which is a bit of a jump these days. And of course, the BBC was complaining about that as well, isn't it? But this report from these people from the Common Sense actually listed, guys, a few of the programs. I can actually, after just a handful of bit of research, can add more to it, because you can look at the BBC's output and it's practically through everything. So some of the examples I've got here: Strictly Come Dancing, Wurzel Gummidge, our own, of course, beloved Doctor Who, Waterloo Road, Horrible Histories, and Blue Peter, which are children's television programs, EastEnders, sport, that certain sports shows are showing this, and also a lot of material in the news. I mean, Paul, when you look at the BBC, what do you think right now about this? And what do you think about them coming back saying we're not woke?
Well, I mean, I would say I'm probably the only person who has a TV license. Still pay for mine, but I'm gonna want a refund come May probably. But that's another story. But I think it's actually really difficult to comment on some of this, because I think, in terms of representation, in terms of trying to show representation in programming. I think that's a great idea in theory, but how it works in practice. And I think the BBC cannot possibly say that they're not woke in their approach to this. I'm sure there are better ways of doing this, but I think they're going to have the wrong way about it. And obviously this campaign's highlighted that. And I think it's ridiculous. There's so many things. I mean, Murder's Easy, for instance, the Agatha Christie drama has had a shift in the narrative to make it more accessible to certain minority. I think that's ridiculous. It's a piece that's written in a certain time where race is an appropriate thing at the time, and it has to work for that drama. It doesn't make sense in the narrative.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at this. For those that don't know, Murder is Easy is, of course, an adaptation of the Agatha Christie classic, which was written first in 1939. It was published 1939. This is Agatha Christie as well. These are classic novels, but of course, the BBC, in its infinite wisdom, and show business in its infinite wisdom, always has to tamper with it and make it suitable for a modern day audience. Now, when I actually come across the modern day audience that the BBC are preaching to, I'll be very relieved, because I see no evidence of it at all. And this latest drama, which was broadcast on the BBC over the festive period, has come up for criticism because, of course, they had to do what they always do, don't they? And they've changed the characters. Luke Fitzwilliam is now a person of color, and of course that it was written by a person of color, and she brought in a hell of a lot of her own opinion into this adaptation of this Agatha Christie classic. I didn't watch it, obviously, but I don't know if you
I've not seen it. I've not seen it either, but I have to say, I think, as far as I'm aware, I think it's set in the late 40s, early 50s, after the war, isn't it? So so there is a lot of. It's about, again, history. Okay, I think it's all right to put someone in that position in a drama that's maybe set in modern day. It's a bit like the race swap for Isaac Newton and Doctor Who. It's a bit like that. It has to be appropriate to what you're doing. And if it's set in a period where race was an issue, what you're doing is you're whitewashing history and not showing it as it was. We have to learn from historical mistakes. If you're going to just whitewash it, then it wraps people in cotton wool. That's not the right thing to do at all.
Mm. Well, this is the thing we know as Doctor Who fans, because we've witnessed this since the Capaldi era of Doctor Who. I think Stephen Moffat himself actually went on record, saying they had to just fib. I'm paraphrasing him now, by the way. They had to fib. They had to tell untruths about certain elements of the past, so it fitted in with what was happening at the BBC today, what was happening with show business's ideas of how you present things. But it's not truthful, is it? I mean, this is not giving away the actual fact. I mean, this is from the Telegraph. The BBC's new Agatha Christie drama uses, quote, an allegory of colonialism in the show. Murder is Easy features a black star and includes themes from West African Yoruba culture. What has that got to do with Murder is Easy? If you are familiar, if you are an Agatha Christie fan, and there are millions of them out there, what has this got to do with the actual show?
What I think is it should be, if you want to create opportunity and to show diversity, create a project which is new and original. Don't hack to death something that's a classic. That seems a bit ridiculous.
Why? I always want,
isn't it?
Sorry, Ian?
It's just shoehorning stuff in. It's and it's in a sense it's social engineering. They're painting something to be something that it blatantly wasn't. So basically, they're lying, and they're trying to pass it off as truth. And especially when it's historical figures, like you've mentioned, they did it with Isaac Newton. I can't remember if it was BBC or another channel, because they're all as bad. When they did Anne Boleyn, and was a black woman. I mean, absolute rubbish.
And that was another massive flop as well, wasn't it? That was on, I believe, was it Channel 4 or was it 5?
It's just offensive, though, isn't it? I mean, people often talk, and I've said it as well. I look forward to the biopic of Nelson Mandela, played by some white guy. Yeah, we know it will never happen because people will be outraged, because you can't race swap and whitewash. But we see blackwash all the time. But we have to accept it, even if it's incredibly offensive, which I personally think it is. It's just...
Like I've said before, I have no objection to this generally in fiction. But
Yeah.
history, that's really important, that's accurate. The BBC were founded on education. Lord Reith would be spinning in his grave at this point, unless he was cremated. So it depends whether or not, if a Doctor Who as well was educational. So when that started, so surely that should be educating families and children as they go on. I learned a lot from Doctor Who from history when I watched it, and which was great. So why can't you be accurate in what you're telling? Because that would make more sense, and it's educational from the BBC's point of view. It's crazy.
Tying in with your point there, Paul, we do have to remind people as well that the BBC was founded on, and also they're supposed to inform, educate and entertain. It's been a long time since I've seen the BBC actually doing that, and actually
entertaining. Yeah,
to push these agendas as well. It's not informing, it's not educating, it's lying, as Ian said there. It is lying, it's telling an untruth. You are watching Whose Views here, and this is Headlines. Thank you all for joining us. We've got some comments in here, so let's go through, guys, and see what you think of these. Jack is here with us. Hi, Jack. Everyone's pointing and laughing at the BBC now. It's become a global joke, exactly like Doctor Who is becoming. I can't argue with that, because, when you look at all the platforms like WhoTube here, you can see all these jobs, because this goes around the world now. The BBC is around the world now with various commentators and what's going on. So it is. Simon's here. Hello, Simon. He's saying, have a look at TV from 50 years ago, 40, 30, etc. Things changed. The BBC must change with it. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's got to lie, Simon. As Paul was saying there, there's nothing wrong with casting an actor in a fictional role, but don't go with it with all this politics that they tend to do with it as well. We've seen this I've got an example here of not just the Agatha Christie one here, but apparently in Waterloo Road, there was a whole couple of episodes on Waterloo Road, which is a very poor man's soap opera, let's face it, based in a school where the children, the pupils of the fictional school, were talking about the slave links that its school had. And I thought, what is going on with this? What is happening with this? Jonathan Howard's here. Jonathan is saying the BBC mistakenly consider soft centre left to be a neutral political position. They cannot see their own bias, like fish don't notice the waters they swim in. Well, that's beautifully put.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Very poetic.
Yeah.
It is, and it's something I can actually go with on that. What do you think?
I think
so. I mean, I have seen other examples of this. If you look at, there's a Sherlock Holmes series in America with Lucy Liu as Dr. Watson. So the gender swapped him into her, and then they've done more recently. I've seen there's going to be another Sherlock Holmes historical, like a Victorian version, and they've got a black actor playing Dr. Watson. So I mean, in fiction, I think that's okay. But it depends how you write it and what you do with the actual drama itself, because it's got connotations of potential car crash TV, if you ask me.
It really does. Woodhouse 122 is here saying the Beeb can't help shove the woke message down our throats. Over Christmas, they aired a famous 5 story where one of the kids was a black transgender. Now, this was one of the shows that was coming up on this. The new Famous 5, which the BBC has got, or as BBC is showing, it's being done by an independent company for the BBC. The character of George, who in the original Enid Blyton books, of course, was a tomboy, which we're not allowed to have anymore. We're not allowed to have young ladies that are tomboys anymore. But when I was a kid, there was a few of them. Let's face it, always mucked in with the lads. No big deal. But yes, they've recast a young actress who's black. Now, I'm not sure if they are transgender or not. I know there's a lot going out on this, but I did research this, actually, Woodhouse 122, and there's nothing to suggest that she is transgender that I've seen.
Have they modernised the setting of it, or is it set in the 50s?
No, it's still set back in the day. And one of the people that were criticising it said everything was right apart from that. That element, and also the fact that George was wearing modern day trainers, one of the big brands, which of course weren't around then. So the BBC and program makers seem to pick and choose what they want to talk about, and it does seem to match their own agenda, doesn't it? Whatever they want to push at the time, and it's very, very odd that the BBC don't see this. And in fact, part of me's thinking, guys, they do. They're just in a denial.
Yeah. I mean, with Famous 5, if one of them's like that, then that's 1 out of 5, which is 20%, right?
Well, that's
which is their quota. So, but yeah, they're trying to convince everybody that this is what the world was always like, and it wasn't. And that they just want to peddle a certain version of it that the soft left likes to believe. So they will have episodes in a soap where in a school they talk about the school's colonial past and everything, whether it's got one or not. They'll invent it if necessary, just so they can have that conversation. They won't talk about the black pupil's ancestor who back in Africa was actually selling the slaves in the first place. They won't go there, because that's a little bit too much like reality. They don't want to do
too much like truth, Ian.
They want to make white man bad, and that's the main reason. It's a perfect example of biting the hand that feeds you, and it will come back and haunt them, and I hope it's sooner rather than later.
It's certainly not helping issues, though, is it, Paul? I mean, this whole thing is actually creating division. It's not actually helping in any way, shape or form.
Well, as we discussed with the Davros Gate issue with wheelchair users, and the idea of the fact that someone in a wheelchair can't be a nasty piece of work. In all walks of life, there are nasty people, white, black, Chinese, disabled, whatever. Not everyone's perfect. So you can't create a perfect society. That doesn't work. It's not realistic. It's very airy-fairy, really.
I'm glad you've brought that up, because this is what concerns me, because sometimes I feel that history is repeating itself here. It's just on the other side. If you know where I'm going to this, that whole thing that's happened all those years ago, it seems to be on the other side now, and the dictation is coming from the other side. And the perfect society you mentioned there, that's what sometimes comes to me, is that was the aim previously. Yeah. It seems to be the aim this time round, just on the other foot.
Yeah.
The danger is there. And if we have our actual national broadcaster not realizing that they're supporting that, this is really dangerous territory, isn't it?
It is. I mean, what could have happened way back could have all looked like Charlie Chaplin. That'd be awful, wouldn't it?
Well, it is shocking. One thing I do want to point out here as well is that this has been going on for quite a while. A lot of commentators and, of course, Doctor Who fans have been dealing with this for a while and pointing it out. We mentioned that we actually started to we saw it creeping into Doctor Who during the Capaldi era, if you remember. But it's actually been way back. Look at this. Now, this is from the 1st of May, 2021, where Craig Simpson of The Telegraph reported on the BBC Children's Show, a BBC Children's Show, everybody, Horrible Histories, which was massive, a hugely popular show based on some extremely popular books. And Horrible Histories was pushing that Britons were black before these Isles were British. Right. Okay. Now, this is actually being pushed a lot more in children's television, I believe, as well. This is coming on to this diversity and inclusion and representation element as well. But it's not true, really, is it? I mean, this is really bizarre stuff to tell children. Is this tying in with the education system as well? Where's this coming from? I just don't understand why children have to be lied to.
Well, certainly in terms of history, that should be as accurate as possible, shouldn't it? You should be telling the truth in terms of history to make sure educationally people get their facts right. And that's what it's all about, doing the research and getting your facts right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? You would think
they care about facts, though, do they? They don't care. They just they almost want to take the responsibility for educating and bringing up your kids away from parents and indoctrinate them with something. It's not a million miles away from what the Nazi Party was doing in 1930s Germany, to be quite honest. They were turning children against their parents. And that's what they're trying to do here to a certain extent. They're trying to convince kids that Britain is different to what it actually was. That, like you've said with Horrible Histories, Britain was black before it was British. All right, where did they all go then? What
happened?
What made this global black population all of a sudden decide to congregate in Africa? Because they certainly all seem to spread out from there with slavery or whatever else. But if they were here first, then they must have all congregated back to Africa before they came out again. So why did they do that? They didn't, because it's bollocks. But the BBC will peddle it anyway, because they'll hope somewhere that some kids in there will believe it, and that's their next generation of acolytes, isn't it? It's really quite sad. But I think it is a version of abuse, because you're deliberately lying to impressionable children.
We've got Java Bean in the comments here saying the entertainment industry is just the propaganda arm of the regime. And hello to Garbage, who's also saying, announced today, Watson Sherlock Holmes spin-off. Yes, he's going to be black in that. Well, you know, I don't mind with some of the stuff like that. I don't know, but it gets too much because you can see it. I mean, I've said before, you can watch commercials now on television and it's all mixed families. And I've often actually asked, how does a white guy in a commercial, in a fiction, how does a white guy with a black woman produce a Chinese baby? I don't understand. I don't understand why. It's just tip boxing. I can now see it and everything. I just don't know. Darren Epp again. The BBC was once the gold standard for broadcasting. How far it's fallen. I'm gonna actually agree with that one as well. And Simon's coming on saying slave links are relevant and true. We just don't like to know about it. The thing is, though, Simon, we do know about it. You know, at school, in and around the Liverpool area, when I was at school, we were taught about it, and we were told to say, "Well, that's history. We've got to learn so we don't do it again." You know, and that's the.
But we don't learn about the thousands, and it was tens of thousands of white people that were taken into slavery before the black African slave trade started, that were taken into slavery in North Africa by Asian and Arab pirates into Southern Europe. We don't ever learn about that. It's almost like, oh, well, that's okay because it's the white people, so that's all right. It's just when it's slightly darker toned skin that it becomes a naughty thing and we must talk about it and make ourselves feel bad. Well, it's not across the board equality. It's very, very
it's selected. It seems to be selected. And what gets me about the hypocrisy with the BBC is we can actually, as I've just done there with some of the shows, we can actually show there is what these people are calling a woke bias. But what makes me laugh about the BBC is that practically everybody in the BBC is middle class.
Yeah.
It's all middle class. Now, they might be of different shades of humanity, but they're all middle class. And they're usually now, of course, having graduated from some sort of university course, which has filled them with utter nonsense in their head as well. And they're all sort of like North London, Islington type area sort of people, you know. That's hypocrisy there. It's like I was mentioning back in November when we did when we watched that awful thing on children in need. Coming to somebody who doesn't watch the BBC at all, apart from when I have to go to my family's house to watch Doctor Who to review for this. Exactly that one, Justice for Davros. But the interesting thing about it, guys, was that I could see the difference in the BBC immediately. I think I said on the show, and the review of that sketch or whatever it was, they missed Terry Wogan. Because you can see it on the stage with the tick boxing elements. You could see that. But when the camera panned round to the audience, every single one of them was white. And I just thought, hang on a minute, you've missed something there. Where's your diversity? Where's your working classes? Where's people coming through that? Who are these people? Are they staff? Are they? I don't understand this. It's just, so we've got Scottish Davros here as well. He's saying BBC are tone deaf again, using the same statements again. History is repeating itself. Well, that's the problem here as well. And Blind Watchmaker, hello to you guys. You sound so joyless and dreary. If Doctor Who makes you this miserable, get out and touch some grass. The thing is, I can't stand it when people tell us to stop watching something that some of us have been invested in for 40 years. 40 years. Why shouldn't we be allowed
52
to
in my case.
Well, yeah.
52.
But this is the thing.
Yeah.
And also, when you tell people to stop watching, what happens? They do. And what happened in the last few episodes in the United Kingdom? People stopped watching. And so did they stop watching in the Chibnall era as well. And that's why it was a massive, massive fail. You cannot deny it, and nobody can deny it. It was a massive fail. And so were these 4 alleged specials that came on at the end of 2023. Because of these things, the British public do not want this. And that's what this particular show is about. So I'm sorry if that upsets you, Blind Watchmaker, but we're carrying on. And we're going to be doing that because we are fans. And this
Can I say, I have seen the grass now and again. I do go out now and again. I don't just stay and lock myself in a room in case that people think I'm that sad.
Kirsty's joining us saying, hi, Kirsty. Nice to see you. Jack is saying something more politely than I did. It's called Conversation. The channel covers both the positive and negative. We do, and we've got lots of playlists here, but this is our headline show. This is our discussion and debate show, and all viewpoints are welcome, and I'm not going to ever say to anybody it's not going to be. So we've got all this coming through here. Thank you for your comments. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. What else we got there? Yeah. So listen, this is all happening. What's going on here? But there was another element that came through on this as well, and we're going to get to that now. There's two main elements. We're touching on what we were saying here. Russell T Davies brought racism into the anniversary specials. Now, this hit on the 23rd of December in the Telegraph, and I was looking at this, and Russell T Davies said that he wanted to make the Toymaker an offensive character. Why would you do that? And why would the BBC allow it? Because he wasn't in the Celestial Toymaker, which we reviewed. There was no hint of that. So why do that? And why allow Russell to say that the 60s, which we know was a different time, we know that racism in the United Kingdom was around because things were changing there. But why go out your way to actually do that? I still don't understand that.
It goes in part and parcel with the thoughts of the word celestial as well. They weren't brave enough to say it has different meanings, and this is the meaning we mean for the character. Celestial means otherworldly, spatial, all that kind of stuff. So it's not a Chinese slur, as some people might suggest. It has been used as such, but in the context of the series, it wasn't. So why they couldn't just use the name as it was originally and have the bravery to do that? I don't understand it.
Yeah. It just seems to be another one of those things, doesn't it, guys? So going back briefly to Agatha Christie's The Murder is Easy. I mean, why they called it Agatha Christie as well? It's not anymore, is it? Because, let's face it, it's not. Murder is Easy, based on Agatha Christie's 1939 novel, is what I'm going to say. According to The Guardian, that well-known supporter of the BBC, their article recently said, has there ever been so much fuss about an Agatha Christie adaptation? This year's dose of Christmas homicide, Murder is Easy, has now received a pasting in the Mail, the Telegraph and the Spectator. And they basically say that the whole problem about this was the black actor, which is David Johnson. I've never heard of him, but I'm sure he was wonderful in what he was doing. They also say it's not the casting so much as the context that offended commentators. The character of Luke Fitzwilliam was reimagined as a Nigerian immigrant on his way from a position in the Colonial Office to a job in Whitehall. I mean,
but no disrespect to the actor playing the part, but in the 50s that would never have happened. Unfortunately, that's again misrepresentation of what would happen at the time. It's odd.
Yeah. Well, the article does go on to sort of suggest that actually the complaints that the BBC received. And I'll quote this. The first thing to say to these complaints, which tend to surface whenever a non-white actor is cast in a traditionally white role.
The Guardian is bound to say anything like that. If the BBC stopped suddenly, the Guardian would disappear right up its backside. Let's be honest. It's just they're aligned. They're two cheeks of the same arse, aren't they? Really,
they really are.
They're not going to be different on anything.
Yeah. This whole thing about the BBC and its woke bias here as well. I mean, more and more people in the UK are noticing this now. There is more conversation coming across this as well, isn't there? There is more criticism, if you like, about this. The BBC are receiving more and more criticism through their own open lines, their phone line, their email lines, through people on these sort of platforms, through other channels. You can see that coming up. You can see the rise in 2023 of their competitors was astounding, really. They're the channels they're trying to close down as well because they don't want that voice heard, because everything is right wing now. We've said this before on the show. Everything and everybody that won't agree with them is now right wing.
Far right wing.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, isn't it? It's all about the labeling. It's all about the labeling.
But it always has been, hasn't it? I mean, you go back to, I think it really became a thing when you had Tony Blair as a prime minister, and there was lots of changes there socially, and that's where you really started noticing that you would get labelled to be shut down. So if you complained or didn't like or objected to rises in immigration, it wasn't for any particular reason that you were concerned about what it might do to a large number in a short space of time, what it might do to infrastructure in the areas that they congregate, perhaps, or anything like that. You know, it was more of you're a racist, in the hope that labeling you a racist would shut you down and stop the debate or prevent debate. And it's just the way it's got. It's labels. It's all about labels, and they are used just in the hope of shutting you down. That's the only reason they are. And if you don't care about the labels, which we don't, then they've got nowhere else to go. They can't cope, because we all know that they can't face a debate. And the BBC nowadays is so thin-skinned. You remember, you go back to the 70s and 80s, 1980s, you know, the only outlet you had with the BBC, you either wrote into a newspaper and had a chance of having your letter published very trimmed down, or it was Points of View. And they would select what went on.
Yes.
They controlled the narrative. Now they control nothing.
Yeah.
And they hate that. They can't cope with that. And it's brilliant. I love the fact that they can't cope with that.
It's true though as well. I mean, you mentioned Points of View there. Just for people who are watching this that may not know that, because you're either too young or outside the UK, Points of View was a show that ran for something like 20 years, and it was a small show. The BBC gave it at least 5 minutes, 5 whole minutes of weekly airtime, so many times a year. And what that was, that poor production office got thousands and thousands of criticisms or praises or feedback, basically, from the British public. They got sackfuls, and it was given 5 minutes a week, you know, to get it from A to B, basically the whole BBC One channel. And what would happen is some of the letters would be read out, and Doctor Who featured in it occasionally as well over the many years the show was going. But that was then, even back then, that was the nod to the fact that they were getting letters. The BBC would get letters. You don't even have that now. That's gone, because they'd be terrified of actually what the feedback is going to be. Because can you imagine it today, guys? What would it all be today? It would all be what we're talking about here, you know. And they wouldn't give. They haven't given it the time of day. They asked Points of View years ago. I was never happy with that either, because I was thinking, hang on a minute, you're cutting off the public here who pay for you, who pay your huge salaries, you know. They all seem to forget that occasionally. Kirsty's here. Hi, Kirst. Well, my fiance is Greek, she says. Apparently Cleopatra was a black woman, so now he claims he is a black man. I saw that one. And I put this up from Blue Planet. Nice to see you. Clunky progressivism has replaced good storytelling. It's tedious at best. And that's all we ever wanted, to go back to what that gentleman was saying before in the chat. That's all that we as Doctor Who fans want as well. We want good science fiction. But the last 3 episodes don't suggest that we're actually going to get that, 4 episodes rather, in the next series, does it, guys?
No, it certainly doesn't. I don't know if it's too soon to touch on what Millie Gibson said, but looking forward to what she said in the press. That's makes it look even worse than we've anticipated, I think.
Yeah, we will be coming to that very shortly. Gary's here. Hello, Gary. Nice to see you. It's simply Orwell's 1984 rewriting history. That does get to me here. We can't do that. And if it's in our show as well, if it's a time and space adventure, you shouldn't be rewriting history. What did Hartnell say? You mustn't change history, not one word. You know, they've forgotten that, aren't they? Yeah. Blue Planet is agreeing. Altering history is part of the dumbing down of the nation, targeting young people with misinformation. Well, that's happening more and more, because we're even getting that now with the rewriting of history, of course, and sadly in education, from what I can see as well. All right, so listen, what we've also got as well, the other complaint that they had is the BBC had 144 complaints about the inclusion of Yasmin Finney in the Star Beast. Now, there's been an awful lot of criticism, if you like, about this coming through, Yasmin's inclusion in the Star Beast, because a lot of people in me say, no, it's 144, only 144 complaints. That's not a lot at all, is it? But the ratings did go down the week after, and the week after, and the week after. And the point being for me is that not everybody phones or contacts the BBC to complain in the United Kingdom. So it's the ratings that could show a certain dissatisfaction, surely.
You like to think so, but there's propaganda with that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, go on, explain.
Well, I was going to say that the propaganda of the BBC claiming the ratings of Doctor Who are much higher than they were registered on the original first night of viewing. Over the 7 days, then the 28 days, or depending how they measure it, they can manipulate the figures how much they want to. And I think Star Beast got 9.5 million, which was interesting.
Really?
Yeah. So to not put your heart out, so.
Yeah. And let's see what the Christmas special gets anyway, because we still haven't had the consolidated for that. It's 2 weeks later, for heaven's sake, nearly. You know, it's crackingly. Oh, I don't know. It's all madness, isn't it? But we've got this here. From RadioTimes.com, the BBC responds to complaints about transgender Doctor Who character. Yasmin Finney played Rose Noble in the 60th anniversary specials, and by God, don't we know it, because we were told throughout the entire episode how beautiful and wonderful she was. Going to this, the BBC has responded to complaints received over the inclusion of a transgender character in Doctor Who's recent 60th anniversary specials. Heartstopper star Yasmin Finney joined the long-running sci-fi franchise in the role of Rose Noble, daughter of former companion Donna, played by Catherine Tate, and her husband Sean, played by Carl Collins. She debuted in the first of 3 specials, titled The Star Beast, where she played a major role in revising the canon in order for Donna to regain her memories of traveling with the Doctor, which still makes absolutely no sense. Editorial comment. They do put into the Radio Times does write there as well, without any fatal side effects. Rose reappeared in the last of the 3 specials, The Giggle, last seen having lunch with her family, where she let slip that she'd been on her own TARDIS expeditions with the 14th Doctor, David Tennant. In December, the BBC revealed it has received 144 complaints regarding transgender representation in Doctor Who, with Deadline, which some of you will know is another website, reporting that some had described it as anti-male and inappropriate. Now, where that comes from, how they've managed to get that information of something being anti-male and inappropriate, I would like to know, because the BBC don't necessarily publish that data. Notably, the Radio Times says, this made up fractional minority of overall viewership for the specials, with the Star Beast topping 7.6 million in its first week of availability. But the BBC has issued the following response. Stand by your beds, because here it comes. The broadcaster has said, as regular viewers of Doctor Who will be aware, the show has and will always continue to proudly celebrate diversity and reflect the world we live in. We are always mindful of the content within our episodes. That was their response. It has been confirmed that Rose Noble will, of course, return in Doctor Who Season 14, which the Bad Wolf is also calling Series 1, which is scheduled to premiere in May. Yes. Brilliant. Okay. I mean, this is, and they say they're not woke. I mean, it's not the fact that a transgender actor. I mean, we have had a transgender actor in before with nobody blinking an eyelid, and that was in the Capaldi era, wasn't
Sleep
it?
No More, I believe. Yeah,
which is an episode that people did sleep through. Let's be honest. But there was a transgender actress there, and nobody batted an eyelid. There was no controversy. It was just there. Okay, which shows actually the tolerance, I think, of the viewership. You know,
well, that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be shoehorned in. I think the Yasmin Finney story, the Rose story, could have worked up to a point. I think by the end of it, it was the way it was resolved, and the suggestion of what they said in the article there about anti-male and all that kind of stuff. If it wasn't for that aspect of it, if it was trying to demonstrate inclusion of a trans person or a trans character, it was fine, but halfway through it, it's just the way it was resolved didn't work very well for me as a viewer.
It's not just that for me, Ian. What comes across from this is that there was the message, the critical drinker, copyright, the message that came from the whole inclusion of this. Constantly reminded throughout the script how beautiful she is, how wonderful she is, how brilliant she is. That was message. The whole scene with those ridiculous pronoun nonsense, where a human being who's that much in time to this magnificent Time Lord, who's thousands of years old, far superior to us in any way, shape, or says in the context of the character. She tells you. I mean, the whole pronoun speech. It's an alien, for crying out loud. I mean, that became as well the biggest piece of ridicule for people criticizing the show on YouTube, on the rival channels, on all the news shows. They all got at it, and they all showed the clip. And of course, what that did is it would have turned off the people that could have come back to the show. They would have went, switch it off. It doesn't. What's the point, gentlemen? Please explain to me what the point of this is and why the BBC are saying they're not woke.
I don't think there is any point to it, to be quite honest. It's like, you know, when you have a famous newsreader, and there's been one recently, hasn't there? A famous newsreader becomes embroiled in controversy, and they say that, you know, they're there to read the news, not be the news. And it's like, the trans element, it was the story. It wasn't part of the story or a character in the story. It was just what it was all about. It was all structured to give focus to that and draw attention to that, which is why we had that pronoun speech, just to draw attention to it's not just humans, it's everybody in the universe that is pronoun savvy, and which is, Christ. And it should not have been this was the first of 3 specials. People were genuinely looking forward to this, and they were just chat on from a great height. It was pointless that they added nothing apart from setting up what we've got now, which is more nothing, really. It's horrendous, absolutely horrendous, and it'll fall on its arse. And
I think it's already starting, don't you agree?
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is doubling down on what Chibnall did, isn't it? Let's face it. This is the handing of the baton, and I can understand why a lot of us as fans are very annoyed at this and upset about this, because we thought that Russell was going to come back and actually give us good science fiction entertainment again and good drama. But when you are, I mean, that whole dialogue in the Star Beast was just lazy. It was incredibly lazy writing. I could have done better, to be quite honest, given something, because that whole pronoun thing, that was a message, that was an agenda. Get off. We don't do that. We don't want that. Pushing his viewpoint into this, because we all know where he is. He's part of the LGBTQI cult. That's where he sits. We know that. And he has actually gone on record over the festive period saying that's where he sits, and he's going to bring it in. That's how he writes. That's what he wants to write. And he's going to bring it into Doctor Who. We're going to be dealing with that on a future show. So there's all this. I mean, when you are writing a story around an agenda, it's not going to work.
Well, the thing is, I think it can work, but not necessarily in Doctor Who. We've said this before. Russell's a great writer. If he's got things to say, do it in a different drama. Do it in a drama that's more appropriate to that genre or that area, that issue. Because Doctor's a fantasy program. It's science fiction. Let's keep it entertaining and escapism. If you want to tell a story about race or about being transitioning, do a drama about that, like you did with Queer as Folk or something like that. Make it something that's more kind of, it can work with the context of its own narrative, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where Russell excels as well.
Yeah.
I've said several times on the show as well, I don't want him back to Doctor Who, and having seen what he's just written, I don't want him there again. And yet we've got 3 years of this thing coming, possibly even 4, where this is just going to dumb down on what he's been doing. I'd rather he went back to Channel 4 and did a 9 o'clock drama about trans issues or whatever, and all this sort of stuff. That's where I think he's best. That's what I think he should be doing. Because again, we've seen elements of this whole thing. It's turning into a soap opera again. That's what he knows how to do.
He likes to take aim at certain things. So I enjoyed The Second Coming at the time. I thought it was really good. And I thought Eccleston was fantastic, but he was taking aim at religion, but it was an easy target. I mean, I'd love to see him do something with Muhammad and taking aim at Islam, but we know he doesn't have the balls. He wouldn't dare do it, neither would the BBC. But he's taking aim now at the fans in Doctor Who that he knows he can piss off, because he thinks they will still watch, but he's got that wrong. And I know 1 or 2 have said, well, you shouldn't watch it, don't watch it. Well, to be quite honest, it's not got the following. People are walking away, and the problem is when you get the people that have watched it for years and supported it for years, those wilderness years that were always there, we've all been there. When they walk away, they aren't coming back. That's gone for good. They drifted with Chibnall, and like you did, JT, you didn't watch any of that rubbish.
No.
But you were prepared to come back and give it a go, because we genuinely thought Russell T Davies liked Doctor Who, understood Doctor Who, and could write Doctor Who. And actually, we're finding out that no, he can't. He knew how to bring it back with a bang, probably didn't know how to maintain it. And now he's come back and it's all about his own personal message. He's got nothing new to say. He's using it as a vehicle for his agenda. And that's all it is. And it's sad to see, really.
Well, it really is. I mean, this ties in. I mean, it's painful as a fan, isn't it, Paul? Where Doctor Who is now continually one of the shows that is used with elements from people criticizing the BBC and saying it's based in woke culture, in hard left ideology. I mean, it's just embarrassing.
It is really embarrassing, yeah, and it's for me, it's really sad as a fan. We mentioned earlier, we've all been fans for a very long time. As I said, I've been a fan since I was about 5, so that's a long time ago, believe me. And so it's sad to think now that the show I loved as a kid and as an adult and still love is being taken away from me because it's not the show that I remember or want to or can relate to because it's almost unrecognizable, even more so than it was in the Chibnall era, which is saying something, I have to say.
Yeah. We're getting an awful lot of comments here from everybody in the chat. Thank you very, very much. I want to address this again from Blind Watchmaker. Thank you for watching and thank you. Welcome. So basically your argument is a trans actor is fine so long as they don't mention it, slow hand clap. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is when you look at the content of the Star Beast, it was all about that agenda. It was all about the trans issue. It wasn't about the Doctor. It wasn't about resolving the Dr. Donna story in a proper way. How did it end exactly? Because this person was saying, oh, because I'm trans and I'm allegedly non-binary, and here's a word for you, Blind Watchmaker, you can't be non-binary if you're a human being. It's a mental illness. You've got all this thing coming up. You know, you've got all this element coming through that. It was all about that. As I've said, nobody made a fuss of the trans actor that starred in or took part in Sleep No More and the Capaldi thing. But when you push it and you enforce it more, that's what rallies people. That's what gets people's back up. And that's what we're getting. From my point of view as a gay man, a same-sex attracted man, all I see all the time now are trans. And I'll let you know, Blind Watchmaker, a lot of the trans issues are actually also homophobic. Because same-sex attracted people are being told you must date and sleep with trans people who we won't do because we're not bisexual, we're same-sex attracted. Do you know what I'm saying? So no, it's not. Yes, bring the trans actors in as well, but don't make it all about that issue. That's not what trans people want, surely.
Well, the same things happened with Ncuti Gatwa. People are praising him because he's black. As the Doctor now, rather than being a good doctor or a good actor. That's not the point, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Not the point at all.
I mean, this is what we are really looking at here. And this is why, you know, when it comes to this, the BBC woke bias here, you can, as I've tried to illustrate, really do push this when it comes in through all their shows. We had an episode of Casualty that dealt with transitioning. All of it dealt with transitioning. That's all. And it was about, there were apparently, I don't watch it, but there were apparently comments in there about it was unfair about waiting lists and stuff like this. Well, do you know what? Welcome to the NHS, because there's waiting lists for everything. You know, and if you're that desperate, find the money and pay for it. Go private. That's what I say. I mean, you know, that's the NHS. You could be, you can need a new heart or a new kidney. You can need brain surgery. You've got to get on a waiting list. Welcome to Britain. You know? I don't know what you guys think about that.
I work for it, so I'll be careful.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's all right. So what have we got? We've got Mr. Brown Alliance. Hello there. Nice to see you. What a load of old bollocks, literally. Okay. The 14th Doctor seemed like a pathetic cook. Okay. Oh gosh, thank you for all your comments here. There isn't an awful lot of comments. I've completely lost you all, but I'll try and keep. So you didn't like it, says Simon. Move on. Yes. Okay. But, you know, this is what it's all about, though. It's all about the talking. This is what it's about.
But that's the thing, though. I can appreciate what Simon's saying, but we want to not move on. We want to enjoy this. That's what we hope for. We hope to enjoy good Doctor Who. We've not got it, so we're disappointed. So that's why we're trying to get our point across how unhappy we are, because we're entitled to an opinion, aren't we?
Absolutely are. And if you know, I mean, for a part of it, not all of it, obviously, because, you know, but for a part of it, it wouldn't have come back in 2005 if a largest group of people hadn't kept it alive in those 16 years that it was off air, you know, and that does, you know, you have a right to an opinion. And, you know, next week we can be talking about something classic Who, which is the fantastic thing about this program, proper Who. You know, we can talk about a story and really show our joy for it. And it shows that we're not blind savants to it, that we can like stuff and we can dislike stuff. And this current stuff, we dislike it. But other stuff, well, like Doctor Who, in some respects, you know, there's been stories going back years with messages. I mean, look at Green Death. That had a massive ecological and political message, but it also had a bloody good story. And people remember it for that, as well as everything else, and it being ahead of its time. That wasn't preaching. That wasn't anything like that. It was just a bloody good story. They can't do that today. It's just message.
I would say, in my estimation, that's because they can't write today. Because as I'm saying, they have the agenda, and then they try and write something around it. Whereas back in then, we had people who could write things and put things, and it was balanced because they also respected the BBC and what the BBC was supposed to do when it came to being impartial. And the BBC is supposed to be impartial. From what I can see, it isn't. It really, really isn't. And we've got all these things coming through. What you're saying there about the Green Death, that was one story. These things weren't every single week. We've had this now since Jodie Whittaker was announced as the Doctor. Oh, it's always been this. The show's always been this. No, it hasn't really. When you go and look at it, it hasn't always been every single week progressive because it was too busy fighting Daleks or Cybermen. There weren't messages in Earthshock, for example. I didn't see any messages in Castrovalva. I didn't see any messages in The Keeper of Traken. You know, there was nothing there. Whereas we've just had 3 episodes put together, which did. Starting with the Starbies, was continued at the very beginning and also into an element of the second one, which I could never remember the name of, and then into the third one, the Giggle. It was still there. We've got alien airplanes here as well. I love that. Oh, Alan airplanes. Sorry, Alan, I love that. He did not mind it. And I had other issues with the episode. I didn't like the male presenting Time Lord, but that's the only bad thing I can say about the episode. Well, that whole thing about a male presenting Time Lord, nonsense dialogue.
Absolute sense. All about sex.
Yeah, it does make sense because I'm not a fan of Jodie's era. I think potentially the argument of a female Doctor is for a different show. With a better actor, potentially could have worked, but I'm not sure it would have worked. But I think the Doctor's been male and female, so he's coming from 2 different points of view. He's seen everything from both points of view, and he's lived, as you said, GT, for thousands of years. He's hugely experienced, or she's hugely experienced. So if the Doctor doesn't have the knowledge to be able to sympathise and empathise with Rose, who can? It's crazy.
But then again, we have to go back to that whole thing. Now, this is where it's all started. It all started with that announcement that the Doctor would suddenly get his gender changed and that a female was coming in to play the role. Not one of us really asked for that. Nobody wanted it. The BBC decided it was time to smash that glass ceiling, as they very, very, very brilliantly illustrated in that awful trailer that they put out at the start of the... You remember when Jodie's Doctor turned around and goes, oops, awful trailer. And there was the glass ceiling.
Tom Baker's got a lot of time for that joke in 1980 when he said, I wish my successor all the luck of who he or she might be. That was your fault, Mr. Baker. That's all.
Yeah, because it hounded the show ever since then, didn't it? Because people started saying, "Oh, could it be this and could it?" But that again, that was done. That was not done for any element of the story. That was done because of an agenda. That was done purely to tick a box, to do something. It wasn't done for creative reasons. We all know that Chibnall said he would do the job only if he could have a woman as the Doctor, and the BBC bent the knee to him because of the success of one show and said, okay, Capaldi's exited, she's brought in, with the rest is history, because it was a massive flop. And the BBC have the audacity to turn around and say, we are not woke. This paper being given to us by this society is wrong. Before I come to actually their response, Alan Airplanes is saying, I love the 60th anniversary specials. I'm so pleased. And the Christmas special, brilliant, fantastic. It's sad to see so many people have drifted away. I would also say to you, a lot of us drifted away during the Chibnall era, as proven. You know, a lot of us drifted away. Some of us came back to give the new version a shot. Some of us are going to be drifting away again. You're absolutely right. And it is sad, because to keep us, all they have to do is just write good stories which are science fiction based about a fella in a police box traveling time and space fighting monsters. That's all they need to do. I don't know. Timescales is saying a vehicle for his agenda. Yet when I raised that point in 2005, he got banned from platforms that didn't even exist. Yeah, that's timey-wimey for you. Simon is saying now RTD is definitely using the show to create a better world. Is he? He's happy with that. I don't feel twisted, but I have changed. I'm going to completely disagree with you, obviously, Simon, because from my point of view and knowing his politics of where he is from my world, i.e. the same-sex attracted homosexual world, I can tell you that a lot of what he's supporting, I'm going to say it again, is homophobic. Totally homophobic, and I for one will not tolerate it. I was a gay rights activist in the late 80s and early 90s. I find myself doing it all again now at my age now. absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of it is coming from my own community, alleged community, because I am LGB. I'm not LGBTQI. LGB without the TQ all the way from my point of view. And if this is in Doctor Who, which it looks like it's going to be, then by God, I'm going to enjoy every single minute of actually bringing it down. Gore Vidal, hello to you. Doctor Who has deeper problems. The first special with Tennant and Davis before the controversy should have been brought to it. Should have brought it to a larger audience, yet it didn't. Totally on the ball. And that was partly because of the reason that people heard before they saw it how off it was. You know, honestly, if you hadn't seen any of that stuff where the BBC scene with the meep and the pronoun scene, it was ridiculed to hell. It was embarrassing. It was all over the place, wasn't it, guys?
It was also when we said I'd heard that they weren't going to promote it very heavily anyway because Disney were waiting to promote it for shooting. So we got dumped on with that because they weren't going to promote the 60th because in America and Disney they didn't know it had 60 years history, so it might confuse the audience apparently. So
yeah, well, oh gosh, it's all right. Jack is saying
that's why it's season 1.
Look at this here from Jack. Was Houdini gay? Was the line about 15's long hot summer with him another example of altering history? Now we talked about this in our Christmas review, didn't we? Because some of the panel, and these two were on that panel there, interpreted that a different way. I just thought it meant a long hot summer, a Girls Aloud song. I thought it just meant phew, like the summer of '76. But other people have seemed to mean it was a bit steamy in the old matron bits. I don't know. I'm not sure.
The Doctor Houdini were like that, weren't they? So
problem being is hello. Problem being, he's saying exactly. JT, the TQ plus colonizers are straight homophobes. There's a lot of that going on. I mean that Q word, I find it hugely offensive.
I mentioned Green Death earlier, and great story, but with a political and ecological message, brilliant. You watched it on different levels, you got different things from it. Written by Malcolm Hulke, a raging Marxist, but you would not have got that from the story. He could be whatever his politics were, they didn't pollute his storyline. And they didn't pollute his books either. And you look at Barry Letts, producer for 5 years on arguably one of the most popular eras of the show. And he was a Buddhist. And apart from Planet of the Spiders, right at the very end, you would never have known. It never crept into it. Russell T Davies can't keep his personal religion out of it. He bases it all around it. And I think ultimately that underlines how good one or two of those people were and how good another one isn't, really, because he just can't get his head in the right space. It has to be about everything that's about him and his belief.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, we are using Russell, of course, as or Mr. T Davies as the figurehead, if you like, for this, because he's the biggest one, and of course he's in Doctor Who, our beloved show. But there are others. I mean, as we know, it's in a lot of the BBC programming. And we, as Ian mentioned before, we have found out, and we do know that the BBC do have a 20% diversity and inclusion ratio on every single show they produce, which has been brought in over the last few years. And it's all as well that in-house as well, they do have the whole diversity and inclusion. Well, we do know the diversity and inclusion officer was there. That was June Sapong, wasn't it? So she left that role. I don't know if it's been filled by everybody else, but this sort of stuff is there all the time now. Who's giving them? Who's telling them what's not impartial? I get the whole thing. It's just absolutely bizarre, the whole thing, and I just find it very strange. It's in absolutely everything.
I've had this argument. A lot in terms of whether someone's right for a job, whether it's an actor, a stage manager, a production manager, a casting person, whoever it happens to be. Whether you're black, disabled, white, Chinese, whatever you happen to be. I think you have to be right for the job, regardless of what your ethnicity or sexuality is. Has to be to do with the fact you're right for the job, and that's how you should get the work. It should nothing to do with diversity at all. It's whether you can do the job, I think.
Absolutely. I'm really enjoying this debate with everybody in the chat, by the way. Please keep it coming. All views welcome, but we will challenge you just as much as you're challenging us. And that includes you, Blind Watchmaker. Thank you so much. He says, as a gay man himself, I've yet to encounter any indication that I'm compulsorily obliged to sleep with a trans person. You sound crackers. Frankly, open a window. I would refer you to the Stonewall redefinition of 2018 of what being homosexual means.
I'll just throw in at that point as well. And I noticed Blind Watchmaker made another comment about Green Death wasn't written by Malcolm Hook. I know that the book was.
Oh, I loved that book when I was a kid as well.
Katie Manning's narration of it is fantastic.
Oh, don't! I haven't got that one yet, and they've deleted it. And it's just like really difficult going around second-hand shops and stuff, hoping that somebody's put it away because they don't like the collection anymore. Because that's happening here in the UK. But that book, of course, I saw before. I read the book before. Well, for the tangent now, aren't we? But I read that book before I saw the TV show and fell in love with it. It was generally part of it was generally quite eerie, wasn't it? It was quite bizarre.
I love the giant fly on the front cover, though. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, this is great with all the comments that are coming through. Let me give you, everybody, the BBC's response to this 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 report, if you like, this paper that was presented to them by the Campaign for Common Sense, partial to some performative drama, the BBC and its bias. And basically, the response from the BBC was, and I will read this to you. Cherry picking a handful of examples or highlighting genuine mistakes in thousands of hours of output does not constitute analysis and is not a true representation of BBC content. We are proud that our output seems to represent all audiences and a range of stories and perspectives across the entirety of our services. There will, of course, be occasions where people disagree with or want to challenge what they have watched or heard, and we have well-publicised routes for them to do that.
Well, to quote the toy maker, that's all right then, isn't it?
All right, you are so right there, Paul. You're so right there. There was another response as well. Oh, sorry, no, there was another response to the BBC which I've read out to you, so I'll pass over that one. That's fine. There was, it's just totally bizarre, and as I've suggested here as well, I really. And this has come up more, actually. I've been saying this before. I really don't think the BBC now knows who its audience is anymore. I think they're totally out of touch with the British working class, for example. You know, I don't think they understand them. It does seem to be, as Ian was hinting at, them very metropolitan, far left elitists, if you like, as well for the BBC. That does come across when you look at, you know, the middle class of the staff. Yeah, I remember when they opened up in Manchester, when they closed the donut and they were supposed to be going around the country to be more in tune with the regions. And they opened up in Salford, which is outside Manchester, for those of you that don't know, if you're outside the UK. And I know lots of people that apply for jobs and not one of them got it because they all came up from London. They commuted or they stayed in apartments in Salford Quays. So they just transferred from what they were doing in London to Salford Quays. So how is that changing? How is that, you know, reflecting?
This the same thing happened with BBC Scotland as well. They'll move to BBC Scotland in Glasgow as well.
Yeah. So it was shocking, actually. And I remember at the time thinking there's not many jobs going in this big building that they're renting. No. Down the road, you know, I thought that's unusual. But their infatuation from the BBC, I think it's very funny that they're always going on about, we're not woke and that they've denied this. When one of the Doctor Who actors, and you touched on this, Paul, so let's look at this now. One of the Doctor Who actors over the festive period has come out as well with this. And this is the new girl herself. This is Millie Gibson, new Doctor Who companion. Millie Gibson says there are so many controversial elements to this forthcoming season. It's what we need. Oh, is it really? This is this is an interview with The Independent, and in this, Millie is quoted as saying, this season has an element of Black Mirror in it, not so much at the start, but definitely grows darker. Now that I sort of get excited about. I'm quite interested in that. This will also almost certainly pique the interest of Whovians. She reckons the new episodes will attract a lot of Generation Z viewers as they go with the times and represent a lot of faces and themes that are really important to see on television. Davis, of course, has long been praised for his commitment to inclusive storytelling, especially his spotlighting of LGBT plus stories from Queer as Folk to It's a Sin. His anniversary special featured a trans teenage girl, Rose, played by Heartstopper's Yasmin Finney, prompting 144 complaints from viewers, admittedly a tiny proportion of the 7.6 million who tuned in overall. Really, 7.6 again? The Outrage Brigade, and that is really harmful, isn't it? That, the Outrage Brigade. I mean, come on, you sound like Mary Whitehouse people. Will probably continue to clutch their pearls. I wonder who wrote this. As the new series progresses, it smells of Flight Attendant to me. There's so many controversial elements to this season, the good sort of controversy, and it's what we need to see on our tellies, Gibson says. Some people, she adds, might think this isn't the Doctor Who I know, but I'm really excited to see it. It's really cool that they're doing concepts like these and changing it up. Yes, let's see if it works like that when we see the ratings put it to 2 million, shall we?
I'm going to buy some pearls, I believe, so I can clutch them. Yeah, so. Unless it's a euphemism, of course.
Oh, well, it could be.
Probably with a brain cell or two. She strikes me as a little bit vacuous, to be quite honest. I doubt she's ever watched the program before, so probably doesn't really know what it needs or doesn't need. And I don't think her opinion counts for squat, to be quite honest. I think she's just speaking lines that she's been fed. Say this.
Yes.
Say this. Toe the party line.
Well, it is absolutely that. But this infatuation they've got with Generation Z. Sorry, I am British. It's not Z, it's a Z. It's because the BBC are all about the license fee. The BBC's day is almost done. And I've said this before with the license fee. They've got to start now looking at other ways to do this. They are actually, I've noticed over Christmas at my family's being forced to watch certain things on the BBC. God help me. All I saw was adverts for the iPlayer, not what was coming on the BBC later on that day, or what was coming on the BBC like you used to when I used to watch the BBC. It's all iPlayer. That's the way it's going. They're going to take the BBC surely off the television and make sure everybody pays for a subscription service on the iPlayer.
I saw a trailer yesterday night on BBC One for Watch the Doctor Who Christmas Special. It's on the iPlayer. If they added a please at the end of it, it would have been so appropriate. It's like, please watch it.
Was it that desperate?
That's what it seemed like. They're repeating the trailer for the Christmas special all the time. It's an iPlayer trailer to get them to watch it. That's why 10.5 million people have watched it, allegedly. So
they probably include people seeing the trailer as one of the views.
Probably,
Which is why they've got to 10.7 million or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to trust those. I mean, on our review shows, as we move forward, as I've stated very, very clearly, we will always go by the overnight figures because they can be fudged.
Yeah.
And that has been proven. And even Problem Being has done a lot of research into this and had discussions with the BBC's entertainment correspondents as well. We're going to be finding out more about this on this channel as well, with Problem Being about what he found out, because they can be fudged and they can be fudged quite easily. And that worries me as well, because the BBC seem to be that desperate to say, actually, all our programs are success, so nobody should be criticizing us, possibly, allegedly. Everything alleged, by the way, everything alleged. Yeah. It's just opinions. Everything alleged would terrify the lawyers. So Matthew is here saying, classic Who critiqued left and right, unlike today. It did, didn't it, Matthew? But not continually. And if it did, it went over our heads as kids, whereas something like an episode like The Star Beast isn't going to go over the head of any kid that's watching this. And we have also had Russell. I can't find where that was from now, but don't forget that Russell T Davies, I think it was from the show you watched after it, Paul. What's that called? Unleashed?
Unleashed, yes.
I think it might have been for that. So correct me if I'm wrong. He basically said it's important that the messages do get to the children so that things change over a generational thing. Well, I think that's a parent's responsibility, not the BBC's or one of its writers.
Yeah.
Shocking to think that.
Could I think if you're going to put a disclaimer in front of a TV program like Talking Pictures TV, they put this program was made at a time when it had people different opinions, that kind of thing. You should have the same disclaimer before Doctor Who if you're going to educate people in a way that the parents aren't allowed to judge that for themselves, surely.
Well, this is the point. Can people judge for themselves now? Because we're now coming to 10 years of this nonsense through the show business industry. We are seeing everything flopping. It's been a terrible year for Hollywood. Let's face it, everything's flopping. The Disney Channel, as TARDIS Spider has pointed out on this very, very channel, is in trouble. Michelle's pointed this out as well. It's in trouble in America. The subscriptions are not coming in. We've now got Paramount and Netflix, Paramount and Disney saying apparently that some of their shows are going to be appearing on Netflix. I noticed that on at Christmas, the first of those shows came up. The awful Star Trek Prodigy has appeared. I've watched the first 2 episodes and pissed myself laughing. It's a real case there of saying, right, but that's what's happening. So, everything's a flop. This has been a flop. We've seen the ratings go down on our beloved show. Rather than being a celebratory 60th year, it was a real letdown, wasn't it? But we've got 10 years of this now. So has the British public got to that point where they'll just accept anything now? Or are they? It's concerning. Yeah, Paul, let me just mention as well, at this point, we know that over 2 million people have cancelled their license fees. And on 2023, allegedly, 400,000 did. people.
Well, what I was going to say was, I don't think people do. People don't watch any old rubbish. That's why the BBC are doing so badly. That's why Disney are doing so badly, because people are seeing these messages, these things, this politics in the stuff they don't want to see. They want to be entertained, and that's what I think. Things kind of messy. But going back to the Green Death that Ian mentioned, if it's done in a way that's subtle, done in a way that's appropriate, that's fine. But find a way to do it to keep it entertaining at the same time, because it's foremost, it's a sci-fi show about a man traveling around in a police box fighting monsters, as you said. That's what it should be, entertaining show with an underlying thing, if you want to, but something that can be seen on different levels, great, but not shoved down your throat.
Scottish Davros here would actually agree with you there, because he says if you put on good content, BBC people will come, but this crap is so people are switching off, and that's being proven, isn't it? You know, when EastEnders on its Christmas Day edition is getting a really low rating, when it used to get 20 big million people watching the thing, and all the shows on the BBC are down. Now, of course, the argument is, oh, television's changed, the way people view things has changed. I would always say, no, not really. If you put something good on, they will come, as ITV has illustrated with Vera and with other things. You know, The Line of Duty on the BBC as well. People tuned in for that. 10 million people. It hasn't changed that much. And I'm going to say again as well. I'm going to rock the boat again. Prove to me that it's the general public watching Doctor Who on playback to get it up to 7 million. When I've seen evidence on X, Twitter, of various fans saying, "I've watched this 20 times now." I'm not convinced about any of this, guys.
Well, the bizarre thing is, I think why the BBC don't, when you register on the iPlayer, you have to put in all your details, your email, all that kind of stuff. So surely when you watch it once, that should count as one viewing. You know, that's it. It doesn't matter how many times you watch it, one viewing. You know, because that's it on your TV. Because you can't do that on YouTube. I don't think you can't watch a video 100 times and get all the views for it. Yeah.
It's how it works with website hits. If you've got proper analytics on a website, you know, it'll note it via your IP address or some other metric, and you can watch it 50 times and it'll count you once.
Yeah.
But iPlayer doesn't do that, and I don't think it relies on you watching the whole thing either. Is it? Do you know, JT, what the minimum watch time is to get a confirmed view, if you like, on iPlayer? Is it a minute?
I think it's a minute.
Right. So
I think it's a minute.
They're not having to watch the whole thing repeatedly, and you will get some of the more devout zealots at the altar of Russell T Davies that will watch a minute, go back, kill it, go back, watch it again, another minute, watch it again, another minute, just because
he's probably doing it himself.
Well, probably, yeah.
No, it could be, but you're also going to get people that are actually. You're in the same ballpark at him when it comes to the political opinion, aren't you? I mean, that awful. Well, I won't mention the name because I might get into trouble. But there's a particular paper that used to be representative of LGBT people, and it's a colour, a name of a colour. That one there, can't be bothered talking about it now. But now it's all about the TQI issues. It's TQI. Now they've praised it to death. They think he's brilliant. You know, worship the grounds he walks on. Of course, so that's going to give it. But it's only a minority of people that will agree with it and watch with it. You know, and there is no balance. What would be real balance? And I've said this before. What would be real balance, BBC and people in Doctor Who especially, is you remember that scene in the Star Beast where what's the name of Yasmin Finis? Rose gets what they call dead named, which I'd never heard of before. And I'm sure that was made up just for this thing. And that scene was there. I would now like to see the other way. I've said this before. I would like to see a scene which balances this up properly, where women are being abused verbally by trans activists, because that happens more than the other way around. So I would like to see that to balance it up.
He had to explain the dead name thing on Unleashed. I hadn't heard of it either, which is
never heard of it.
My ignorance, to be fair. But he mentioned it on Unleashed, so I had to explain it. But it gets back to the argument. I agree with you having 2 points of view. It's like the Davros argument again about if you're going to show representation, you have to show a balanced representation. So if Davros is an evil disabled person, like we have Shirley Ann Bingham, she's a positive disabled person, you've got the balance there. So why can't you have both?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Well, there's no both.
Yeah.
Is it? There's one-sided.
Yeah.
And this is where it's come in, where these people are saying, you know, the BBC is now in breach of its own impartiality rules, and they're not going to admit it. Obviously, the responses to these things are going to come back. They're not even looking at the fact that they are losing license fee payers. The actual license fee pays for the BBC. It supports them, even though the majority of its broadcasting now is outsourced. So obviously the BBC has to put something into that when they ordered the show or they commissioned the show. But the money is down. The license fee is going up in April 2024, as I said at the top of the show, to £173 per household. Part of that is because a lot of people have stopped paying for it and won't be paying for it. And I can't wait to see how many people come the end of March will cancel it again. You know, so how much more? They're not helping themselves here. And all they have to do is go back to that entertain word. Entertain and put something. I mean, when you've got people like Gary Lineker, for heaven's sake, Gary Lineker seems to rule the BBC. They're not containing him in any way, shape, or form. You know, allegedly, we've heard that Russell T Davies had his wrist slapped for being naughty at certain award ceremonies a couple of years ago. Gary Lineker allegedly has had his wrist. It's not enough. It's not enough because they're not impartial and they're enforcing their own material into a show on the national broadcaster, on shows onto the national broadcaster, and they're not looking at the fact that the BBC, the great British public, are turning around saying, "You're not providing anything we want to watch." What do you think?
Well, I think the BBC has to become, if it gets any traction at all, it has to become like a Netflix model or a Disney model, and you can option it if you want it, and that's it. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah.
The fact that the BBC can force you to pay for a license fee for it if you want to watch something else.
Yeah.
That is not the BBC at all. If you don't want to listen to BBC output at all, radio or TV or iPlayer or anything, if you just want to watch Netflix or whatever, you still have to buy a license that funds the BBC. That is obscene. And if everything that they're doing is, and if their message and everything is on point, and if it's genuinely what they believe, which is everybody in the country wants it, then they have nothing to fear about going to a subscription model because everybody will pay for it because they're doing what people want. So they should put their money where their mouth is and they should say, right, subscription model, because we know they'll die on their ass because the ones that they're pandering to don't buy a TV license anyway. They don't buy anything, literally, really, that would go in any way to produce that content. They don't pay for anything like that. They'll have no money whatsoever. And it'd be quite amusing to see, to be quite honest.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it? One day, Ian, we may actually even get a government, a central government that has the balls to actually do it as well and say to the BBC, you're cut off. You're not getting any more. Certainly, if I was in politics, that would be one of the first things I'd be doing. I can assure you. The BBC today is not what it was when we were growing up. It's certainly nothing like it. I don't recognise it at all now from my experience. I agree with here with JFO as well, just as a side. Honestly, would have preferred if Moffat had come back as a showrunner now instead. He writes the Doctor better, in my opinion, and would not get involved in the BS behind the scenes like T. Davis has done. I would tend to agree with that. But ideally, in my world, I would have liked to have had Doctor Who rested, to be honest, for a little while, because I don't trust anybody in show business really to be able to produce it properly, because even Moffat had to shoehorn stuff in, as we were saying earlier, because the dictate was coming down from high. You have to have this quota. You have to do this. We have had some fantastic debate in the chat on this particular show as well. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us. It's been very difficult to keep up with you all, but I noticed you have been very busy with yourselves there. It's absolutely fantastic. It's
busy on the like button as well.
Oh, thanks for that, Ian. Yeah, you could do that. If you look at guys at what's happening in the chat, it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm really pleased about that. This we are coming to the end of the show, and I just want to say thank you so much for this. This is a show, this is a channel where all views are important, where we should be challenging ourselves. This is what freedom of speech and democracy is all about. We're not going to close anybody down. We're not going to ignore anybody. I just want to make that very clear, because I haven't been able to keep with you all in the chat. It's been fantastic. You've been chatting, and that is brilliant. This is what it's about.
Can I say one thing that has been bothering me just with recent narratives around the internet and all that kind of stuff? Fans of a certain age, like myself, and I put myself in this. This is from my point of view, that we've been perceived as entitled fans, and we're moaning about Doctor Who because it's not our show anymore, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we're entitled to it because we are fans. And I don't understand why the BBC or Russell T Davies are trying to get rid of the core fandom, because that seems like suicide to me for a franchise. Get rid of the people who support you doesn't make any sense. So why are they doing it? So I'm wondering about this because I love the series. I want to still love it and still be part of it. That's why I'm making my point tonight.
Well said, Paul, because I think you're speaking, you're definitely speaking for myself as well. I won't speak on behalf of Third Doctor Ian, but you're definitely speaking for me on that. I love this show. I have invested so much time into this show. I grew up with this show and I love it. And sometimes I look at it and I just think, who are you aiming it for? Because nobody's there. It's a very small minority that you're aiming at and you're pandering to. Let's say that, pandering to. You know, the stories are weak. Give children, give young people, give adults, give people that pay the license fee back, give science fiction fans, give proper stories.
Yeah. But to add to what you're saying, Paul, if I may, is like, all right, JT, you've said you don't, but I still do at the minute, although I am questioning why. But at the minute, Paul and I, we still pay for a TV license. But you, JT, don't. But you look at the background behind you, and look at the background behind you, and if I had a light on background behind me,
yes,
and all the stuff there, all percentage of that goes to the BBC as well.
Yeah,
it's not just that we've supported it for years; we bloody pay for it as well.
Yeah,
we pay for it to be produced.
This is a joke, but I own Doctor Who. I've paid for it. Yes.
Well, we do contribute to it directly, which a lot of the people that it's actually being directed to don't.
Absolutely. Well done, you two. I think that is absolutely brilliant what the two of you said there, and totally agree with you as well. We have invested in this show, so we should be entitled to it as well. And these idiots that are coming along now and saying, you know, well, it's not for you anymore. Why isn't it for you? All entertainment should be for whoever wants it. It should be accessible to all. Don't be telling people it's not for you. Why? You should be able to go and watch a children's show with kids and get something from it, like Doctor Who used to be. Grannies and parents and, you know, whatever, aunts and uncles would sit with me as a kid, as I was thrilled with the Doctor's adventures in time and space, and they'd be thrilled because I was thrilled, and they got something out of it as well.
And I bet if you asked that question, why is it not for us, they couldn't answer it.
Yeah. Well, they can't. But we've also seen, I think it was one of you guys that was saying on the Review of the Year show for last year, that somebody had said, oh, we're just going to watch the show, we're not going to invest in the merchandise. That's where it's going to hit them, because this show now needs to make money, because it's now a partnership between BBC Studios, Bad Wolf, Disney, and for the BBC. It has to make money, because a hell of a lot of investment is going on there. You need a return from that. The merchandise is dire. I can say that as well, because I like to think of myself as a big merchandise person. Nothing's interesting me. Nothing's interesting me. I'll be looking at those wonderful pieces of work from people like 10 Acre and Telos, all the independents who are doing stuff about the era I class as Doctor Who. I'm not going to be looking at buying Ncuti Gatwa's series. I'm not going to be looking at buying the Daleks in colour. They're missing the point here as well. And for the BBC to turn around and deny that they are woke, it's laughable, really, isn't it? I want to say here, Matthew is saying here, Gibson isn't the brightest bulb on the Xmas tree. She can barely string a sentence together in interview. I've not seen her on the telly actually talking about it, and I just want to point out, in case anyone is watching, the guys are quite right. I do not have a television license. The reason being is I do not watch live television.
Yeah.
Nino, yes. Exactly. I want to make that very clear. If I want to watch Doctor Who live for one of our review show, I have to go to my family, and they will testify to that. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I do not watch. Yeah, and I don't use the radio. I don't want to have anything to do with the BBC if I can help it at all, because I'm all for defunding the BBC as well. Doctor Who 1963, it is lovely to see you. Welcome to Who's Views. Gen Z, don't give a toss. I am literally in that generation. Oh, are you? Nice to see you then. And everyone my age is turning to Japanese entertainment. Yes, Japanese entertainment like Dragon Ball and One Piece, etc., etc. You are up. I get this. I was reading about this over the Christmas holidays, just thinking this is really interesting. Some of these youngsters, like our friend Doctor Who 1963 here, are actually sensible. And they're looking at what Hollywood and the show business of the West is giving out, and they're going, oh, bugger off. And the new Godzilla movie is huge. There's subtitles in it. I'm going to have real problems reading that, trying to keep that, because I can't do that. I'm damn well going to support it. It's lovely to see you, Doctor Who 1963. If you haven't subscribed to us, please do. That'd be great. And he's also, I'm assuming you're a he. Am I assuming your pronouns? It's sad, but the group they are aiming for don't care at all. From the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Russell T Davis is that bloke. He's wrong side of 60. Not saying wrong side of 60, because I'm nearish there myself, but he's the far side of 60, and he's trying to desperately stay relevant. So he's attaching himself to the TQI cult, and he's getting it monumentally wrong. And they'll end up. They always do this. They'll end up turning on him, like some of them have already. And they'll just eat each other from the inside, and where will he go then? He'll just be a washed up has-been that's an embarrassment and nobody else will touch.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, another comment here is, again, thank you so much for all your comments on here. It's been brilliant. I'll have to look at these at some other time, because you've just had loads of conversations, and that is brilliant. We've got Problem Being here saying, don't forget the BARB, which is the British Audience Research Bureau, which does all the ratings. It's a private company free from the public oversight, and it is part owned by the BBC. I had forgotten that, and you're quite right. Yeah. You're quite right. It's also, as well, what they tried to keep quiet as well is the company that looks after the license fee as well. When you phone, as I did all those years ago, to phone up to say, I don't want my bloody license fee anymore. The woman on the end was very, very nice. She's very courteous. But that company, allegedly, is also part owned by the BBC. So, it's a case where they'll try and turn you around at that particular, but they didn't bother with me because I'm quite hard-faced on the phone.
They do all the ticketing as well. All the ticketing.
Yeah, well, it's true.
If you apply to go and be in the audience for things like Strictly, same company.
Yeah. Libro Paradiso, nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. I don't think the Gen Z kids who watch Stranger Things, One Piece Man and Wednesday will flock to Doctor Who in the same numbers. Obviously they didn't, because the 4 specials that have been out recently didn't get them. I think there were a few that came over from Netflix's Heartstopper, but that was only for Yasmin. And I do know, having seen some of them on the old X Twitter, that a lot of them were disappointed with the fact that Yasmin wasn't in all 4. All 4.
She is coming back though, isn't she?
Yes, Yasmin Finney will be back. We know that. We saw Yasmin in the trailer for the next series there. That's going to be, but I think that
she is, isn't he?
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
Time to go for things. So the BBC is now acting as an educational source, replacing parents. Oh, what could ever possibly go wrong with that? We're seeing that more and more in our culture, aren't we? Really, that's also happening in education, where they're all doing that as well. You can see all this sort of stuff coming out now. Oh, right. So listen, I want to say thank you. What's this? Woodhouse 122? Even the Bond films now have a trigger warning.
Yeah, the Connery ones. Yeah.
It's in the news today.
Yeah.
Well, if the Connery ones have that, I expect one coming on for the Roger Moore ones to say, be wary, this is really camp.
Yeah, I watched, on the subject of editing, I watched Carry On Screaming, and I'm sure there's a bit cut out of that as well. I couldn't believe it.
Listen, the Carry On films, I am a huge devotee of the Carry On films. I love them. They're going to be down to 10 minutes in the near future, because every year they cut a little bit more out. If you're a Carry On fan, go and get the DVD box set of all the films together now before they cancel it, because they're not uncut, and you can see those lovely things. The big one that is always there, I've mentioned this before, is when Barbara Windsor comes in Doctor, and she's on the trolley, and Jim Dale's there. He takes back the blanket off Barbara, and all she's got is the little hearts in strategic positions, and he goes to as Jim Dale is masterful in doing, but the gag flops because they've cut the bit where he takes the blanket off, so he just looks like a prat. There's lots of that going on, isn't there? There are more people in the UK now, says Garbage. Viewing figures should be going up, not down. Excellent point. It really is an excellent point. What we've got there? Oh, gosh. Yeah, we've got loads. We've got Problem Being knew exactly what I was talking about before. That's all I'm going to say on that one. Java Bean is saying, I wish they'd stop dead naming Doctor Who. Oh, it really is. And Woodhouse is saying, yes, it's the BFI that are warning about Bond movies in a season there.
Jesus.
That's just.
It makes you worry for the future of the species, doesn't it? If they don't have the mental resilience to watch a James Bond film.
I do worry about so much. Oh gosh, sometimes I can't
I'm a big
sleep.
fan of Dad's Army. To quote Private Fraser, we're all doomed.
We are
I
all
tell you,
doomed. Well, listen, we're going to wind up now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ian. Thank you to Third Doctor Ian, and thank you to Paul for joining me for this Headlines, where we're discussing Headlines is going to be we were talking about more topics soon. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so you know when we're going live with that. This is our latest in our playlist and our shows. We've got a lot more lined up for you. We're developing a few more new shows for you as well, but this is going to be one of our, as the title suggests, this is one of our news shows where we get to debate, discuss, and give opinion over news items that are affecting us as Doctor Who fans and affecting the show. All views are welcome. You are all very welcome. You don't have to agree with us here. You really don't. And it's great to see you. So thank you, everybody that's joined us for this tonight. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And we will see you again next time on Whose Views and Headlines. Take care of yourselves. Thank you again to you too. I hope you've enjoyed the show.
A lot of fun. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I loved it.
Right. I'll pay them later. We'll see you again very soon, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.